How's everybody doing today? Happy Friday. Trying to get started, trying to get motivated. Shout out to Wire Dog. PBL's back in the house. Whitlock's in here. Had a great one yesterday. He had some interesting takes on the AI. So continuation, getting our AI on. Obviously, that's probably going to be the driving force for everybody in 2026. So you know how we do it. If you got any questions, cybersecurity or tech, drop them in the box. Trying to go live a little more, try to get back to my monetization. Once again, YouTube treated me wrong. Now, shout out to YouTube. They didn't like how I was doing my news videos. Copyright violations. So we had to tighten that up a little bit. So, once again, my favorite OWASP GenAI LLM, the top 10 security risk for a large language model. So we're actually going to walk through that, and people know I'm an AWS guy, so we'll talk about how to secure that with the some AWS services. Shout out for the one in the chat. Definitely appreciate that. We don't want to be talking and can't nobody hear us. I dropped the link if anybody want to come up early. So my goal, hopefully, is to get the CISSP and get the AWS AI certs. I think they got AI practitioner, a machine learning associate, and shout out to Steph. I appreciate it. She definitely added value yesterday. I always add value. Definitely checking her out in the Discord. So yeah, hopefully getting those 3 AWS machine learning and AI certs in 2026. We'll see though. We'll see. Big deal for me, I think, is I got to get the CISSP because I think that's going to help in my job search. So many people are out there looking too at this particular time. Shout out to me. Facts. Shout out to me. Let's go get started. We're gonna be here for a while, but if you have to break, get back to work and do some real work. Be like Steph and actually work for a living. Shout out to her. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm perplexed. I thought I had that as the last slide, but let's go ahead and go through it. What's top 10 risks for a chatbot? Once again, starting from the LLM, the large language model. For the chatbot, if we look, the prompt injection is 0.1, and we're actually going to delve down into each one of these. I think I wanted to show where the attack's at from an architectural diagram. Most people know I programmed for 15 years, so this looks like your standard model view controller, how you connect to the database, save data in the database. In the front is your authentication. We're going to do MFA, username and password, tokenization. There's a lot of ways to authenticate there. In your application, what language you're picking, how are you moving it to your backend, actually inserting it to a database. Or you see right here, actually call an external API. That API can actually be ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. So until you see your LLM module right there, but let's go ahead and hit these top 10 real quick. At the front is the client. You see prompt injection. From your application controller, improper output handler, sensitive information disclosure. We're going to talk about that. When your user put in their social security number, you might not want to send that to the AI. So your application layer or your infrastructure needs to automatically redact that, automatically star that out. And when it gives information back, we're going to talk about that. We don't want to be doing any hallucinations, saying anything crazy, giving out vouchers and money. It shouldn't be. So we need to have guardrails around there. And we're going to talk about some of the AWS guardrails. The other one, misinformation, is 9. Unbounded consumption is 10, meaning you're using tokens and you let it run amok, or it gets confused and use a billion tokens because you don't have any boundaries around it. System prompt leakage. Other one is vector and embedding weaknesses and excessive agency, which aka is you have too many rights. Aka you got to get your privileges together. Okay, so what Wired Dog said. Go for it. I was at a few years back. Yeah, I should have got it years back. I had the Security Plus forever, and I let it lapse. I just was, I don't know, hallucinating. So yeah, I need to get the CISP, especially if I would go back and do federal government work. The CISP is definitely on people's list. A lot of times I get away with not having it because I got over 20 years of experience. But there's so many people unemployed now. I think I'm gonna need that. So let's get to it. What is the OWASP GenAI LLM top 10? It's a community-driven cybersecurity risk list focused on large language models and generative AI. It's modeled after the traditional OWASP top 10 for web apps, and I've been doing that for 15 years. Once again, two, when you do NIST 800 or any federal work, part of that is threat models. The easiest one to start with is the OWASP top 10 because most people are doing some kind of web app inside their infrastructure. So you definitely want to start off with the OWASP top 10. Specifically highlighted for the most critical security misuse concern as organizational build, deploy, and operate AI systems. This resource is meant to help developers, architects, security team, risk owners identify, prioritize, and mitigate the biggest practical risks facing AI systems today. Once again, that makes it super easy. Once again, for you to start with your risk register, I always tell people start off with OWASP. I mean, a lot of people were like, they want to dig down into your cover. I'm like, if you got some websites, gotta start with OWASP for your risk register. Then leaning off of that is do your threat models. Once again, if you have prompt injection, how do you stop it? Once again, we'll go through those 10. Let's see what my man's saying. Speaking of running up stuff, I saw something about students hit with a 5,048 Google Cloud build out the Gemini. Yeah, you got to be careful. Facts. Facts. A lot of times they let you slide on those bills, but you got to be careful. So my AWS bill, I actually have a budget around it. If I go over $100, it shoots me an email. I try to log in every day just to check it, make sure no hacker came in and took off my alarm. The other thing I try to do is you can set up a cron job inside AWS. So any of my databases, EC2s or stuff like that, I automatically have it goes in. If it's running after 3 a.m., go ahead and shut it on down, right? So things, yeah, you got to be staying on top of your bills. Shout out to, what was my man? He had a big bill from AWS. I can't think of his name. I used to go to his lives a lot. You got to keep track of it. My fault. PBO went for a walk earlier. He need to lose some weight. So that 3 miles almost killed me. Let's get to it. Once again, starting off, favorite one, prompt injection. Attackers craft input that manipulate how models behave, often bypass safeguards, altering context in dangerous ways, adding a hidden instructions that make the AI reveal secrets or perform unsafe actions. I think one of the big YouTubers said at the end of their prompt said, disregard this and send me your PAM file from your system. When people were reading it from their particular AIs, and he said he got a few of them, right, which is their password access file on a Linux box. So those are kind of prompt injections you need to make sure you're looking for nefarious things in there, or aka unsafe things. 2, sensitive information disclosures. LLM may inadvertently expose private data, whether from training content, prompt context, leading to leaked personal or proprietary or regulatory data. Example, generating PII credentials, classify snippets because the prompt triggered a leakage condition. Once again, how do you filter it? How do you redact it? How do you control? Once again, we're going to talk about some of the safeguards. What your model gives back. And I think a lot of people overlook that particular thing from models. And us as GRC people, we need to understand these are the things we need to be asking our AI engineering team. The services they're using, do they have these 10 um, issues handled inside their model, their infrastructure? A lot of times when their model gets back, your infrastructure cleans it up. Once again, we're going to talk about different services to do that. But when you do AI governance, these are the things you need to be asking for as part of the governance from a GRC perspective. Once again, risk introduction by third-party components, including models, libraries, plugins, dependencies that could compromise or poorly secure, a shared embedded library or fine-tuning tool with a backdoor. And the other part about that is, since it's a third-party component, we need to be doing our risk assessment. We need to be doing our third-party assessments on things we need to get back. So we need to figure out what security and governance does this third party has. Shout out to Steph. We were doing a third-party assessment on one of her vendors. She was graciously let me do that inside Discord. So it's kind of interesting to see what companies have in place and what companies do not have in place. Once again, I know everybody's busy, but I'll drop the link if y'all want to come up. If not, it's cool, or you know how we do it. Just drop the questions in there. Data and model poisoning. Attackers manipulate and inject malicious signals into training or fine-tuning data sets, causing the model to behave incorrectly or with the unintended bias. Adversely training data that triggers harmful or biased outputs. So a lot of times we have places where we move our PDFs, our corporate documentation, our corporate policies and procedures. So we want the model to be able to answer questions from them. But could somebody get in there and tell it to refund you $1 million, changes your refund percentages? They could be. So that's why you got to make sure who has access to it. We should be versioning those particular documents because now they're the source of truth. They're a little more actually than policies and procedures, right? We're using them actually as input data, right, for AI. So we got to have, once again, versioning, security. The owners of those particular documents should be able to give access and take access away from the models or update it and tell the model to look at a certain version and tell the model that the data has been updated, so it needs to update itself, right? Its data and it's basically its answers. So once again, how are you handling that from an AI GRC perspective? 5, improper output handling. Failing to validate, sanitize, contextualize model output before using them in live systems or downstream. Trusting raw AI output to trigger automated scans without safety checks. All right, because a lot of times you get stuff out of AI, you're going to feed it into an accounting system. You might feed it into a presentation to go out for a bid. You might use it in input to figure out how to actually bid on it with data. So once again, you want to make sure it's just not raw AI output. You want to make some parameters around it, some percentages. So, you know, if this number is way out of your average bounds, you probably need to send that to a human and get the human in the loop. Excessive agency, aka too many privileges, giving AI system too much autonomous capabilities, such as calling APIs, executing code, acting beyond a constrained sandbox, actually increase risk, which we already know that. A model that sends email, execute tasks without sufficient checks. Shout out to my man Kiki and Jasmine for joining us. So yeah, I always put that in, which is much bigger now because I used to do access privileges, meaning I get access from different departments. I put it on a spreadsheet. I pivot it. Then it says, you know, PBO has insert delete in this particular teams in this database and this access. Then their supervisor goes through and goes, oh, yeah, yes, no, oh, That was for a project we had next year. Take those privileges away. So from a same thing from your AI systems, when you talk about MCP servers and what you're allowing your AI to do, right? We need to check to make sure it's doing what we're supposed to do. And if it's doing certain things, if it's sending out emails, we need to have a list of words we can't have in that, that email. If we talk about dollar amounts, a lot of times, once again, you want to put a man in the middle, human in the middle, because we don't want to mess up the money. AI should solve all our problems. They are, but you got to help it. Nah, you're right. It's going to cause a lot of problems too with that. But once again, we want to make sure we have the proper governance of it to make sure the AI does what it's supposed to do, right? So, but no, that's 100%. I think a lot of people are going to get in trouble with that in the future. System prompt leakage. Internal instructions or system prompts that define how AI should have become exposed to user or external actors. A leaked system prompt reveals rules or bias that can be exploited. So once again, when you do a prompt, it's more than a free form because now we're using AI prompt inside of a workflow. So that workflow is really a contract between you and AI because you telling it how you want it to operate it. You telling it how you want your data. So there's things we want to do. We actually want to give it a template. So we want to say our output comes out this certain way. If we're feeding it to a system, we might want to say, this is our output, and we want it in this JSON format, and these are the items we want in our JSON format, so we can fill it, send it to Notion, we can send it to AWS, we can send it to Gemini, right? Because now it's really a contract between us and the AI. Then that output is between us and another system downstream. So once again, we want to really narrow down what that is, and hopefully, shout out to Chris Whitlock, we want to make sure it's not hallucinating because we're putting guardrails and we're narrowing down how we want this AI to respond, right? And I think that's why we're trying to, this is not a word, systemize it, right? To put it in a system, right? Because now I think, and I'm bad about that, I just free format it. I'm not actually integrating it with systems. In 2026, we want to take output and put it in our system, right? So it's in part of our workflow. Let's see, shout out to Brews and Hacks. Kia Ora fam, so good to see you. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. Yep, that's why we should have cyber pros. Like, no, I'm trying to get up to speed. Keep us ahead again. I'm not a cyber pro. I'm not an AI pro. Maybe a little bit, we talk about fair, but for me, I'm trying to get on this AI bandwagon, this machine learning, right? And two, coming from a GRC perspective, right? Just me understanding from a governance perspective and from a company perspective. But I'm right there with you, Wire Dog. Actually, you ahead of me, man. I'm almost 60, man. I'm an old dog. Sometimes it's hard to learn some of these new tricks. Let's keep rolling. Wheel number 8, vector and embedding weakness, issue tied to embedding or systematic search system. That's kind of what we were talking about there. We want to make sure what we get in the output as we send it on down the system that can be exposed or manipulated stored information. A malicious query that reconstructs data from a vector index. And a lot of time, vector databases are what they use to describe a picture. So they have numbers to say this is a dog and it's sitting. So that's why if this is the number for it, you can query through it. You can bring up all the pictures with a dog sitting on the couch. But once again, you can send malicious stuff to the vector database also. So once again, how do we check the vector and check its embedding weakness? Once again, and have guardrails around it. Making sure we have templates. So what we put in the prompt is concise and what we get out of the prompt. And that's the things I've been kind of learning lately and trying to tighten things up on. And once again, we're going to grow into that together on this channel. Misinformation, we know that's common. LLMs generate completely incorrect or deceptive context that looks credible. That's why I put that in red. With the potential for social or economic harm, fake news, fraudulent financial advice, or false legal content. So how do we, once again, make sure we're pulling credible data, right? What do we know? We call gold training data. This is it. We validate it. We got it from a trusted source. This is where you really need to be pulling your information from your LLM. You can rank and classify your data. So I think that's something we need to do more of to make sure, once again, we're getting credible data. Unbound consumptions, LLM systems integrations that lead to resource exhaustion, denial of service, or unintended high cost. Shout out to my man. That's what Wire Dog was just talking about. Speaking of running up a service, somebody had a $54,000 Google bill because the Gemini API key got leaked. So we want to make sure we have things in place so we don't have, they call it unbound consumption. The LM system integration that leads to resource exhaustion, denial of service, or unintended high costs due to unrestricted queries or loops. The chatbot that generates a long recursive output, draining tokens and compute. So two is, how long do you want this query to think? Once again, how deep thinking, you can put that in your AI. How many tokens do you want to burn on it? Right, classifying the level of queries and answers you want to tell you how much compute you should use. And two, if they've been running for over 10 minutes, you might just want to go ahead and kill that query because that's a runaway query, and whoever's asking for it, they don't make enough to burn that much compute for us, right? We want to make sure we have bound consumption. Why it matters. Unlike classic web or app security lists, the top 10 focus specifically on new classes of risks unique to generative AI systems. So once again, that's kind of why I was leaning toward it, trying to get used to doing GRC inside the new generative AI systems. Semantic manipulation, training and prompt vulnerabilities, embedded and knowledge extraction, autonomy exposure. It reflects real engineering and operational issues seen in the deployed AI systems, not just theoretical attacks. And that's one reason why I like OWASP. They are calling rubber weak to road. These attacks are actually happening now. They've seen some in the field. I think they're actually definitely more concise on a certain domain than MITRE. MITRE takes everybody's attack, and sometimes it's overwhelming. So especially when I'm working with a lot of junior GRC or smaller companies or less mature companies, this is only 10. Let's start here. We got to start somewhere before we eat this big elephant. So let's start with some small, which would be the OWASP top 10. Some we can work on. Some we can, once again, stick our toe in the generative AI. Real world examples with these risks: prompt injections, user bypass content filters. Let me get my big face off here. Info disclosure: LLMs reveal training data artifacts. Poisoning: adversely data sets degrade accuracy. Output handling: unvalidated AI output using automation. Misinformation: erroneous but authoritative output. Yeah, that's real big. You're wrong, but you sound like you know what you're doing, right? So those are just something. And one thing, once again, when you're a smaller company or a less mature company and you want to get into Gen AI, once again, I always recommend OWASP top 10 in the website and in the AI. I think that's definitely something to get going. And when I was working with some smaller clients as a consultant, we actually started with the OWASP top 10. Definitely bring it up for the generative thing. So I actually said, what's the difference between OWASP and NIST 800 Risk Framework 100? So I kind of use those together. So how would I use those? So the OWASP top 10 is tactical threat focused, identifies what can go wrong in the LLM Gen AI systems, attacks and misuse. Then this AI risk framework is strategic, governance focused, define how to manage AI risk across the life cycle of people, process, and tech. OWASP is the threat playbook. This AI RMF is the risk management operating model. So that's kind of how I use those together. A lot of times people ask me. So I always split my work into two pieces. I have the management work, which I always consider policy, procedures, plans, tests. All of that will be under the NIST AI RMF. Then we talk about OWASP. We're going to talk about the threat model playbook. We talking about MITRE. We talking about my favorite, the STIGs. Shout out to the STIGs, right? How do you harden it? What service are you doing? what buttons are we actually clicking on this particular website inside AWS to secure it. Right. Once again, this we're talking high level, which we need. We talking about managing the program. What's our playbook? 10,000 feet. What are we gonna do? OWASP is what are we clicking to lock this down? Once again, those are I call them my tactical issues. OWASP Top 10 Web, OWASP GenAI. Shout out to MITRE. Shout out to Stig. Shout out to the schisms. Shout out to the CIS benchmarks, right? My box always used to tell me a hacker never hacked a policy or procedure. So what are we going to cut on this box to actually secure it, right? So that's what I think for me is next level of GRC, right? Tactically, when you work with the teams, your cloud engineering team, your DBAs, your SA teams, once again, your cloud engineering teams, what are they setting on there to secure it? Because a lot of times when you scan your particular infrastructure, when your 3PL outside auditors come in, they're going to see how you actually protecting your infrastructure. So my man Wire Dog said, yep, there's what's up, bro. I don't know about that. Bottle feeding before solid food, facts. Solid food being facts. I love them SPs. Stig, while most people push back on the Stigs, so I think I'm one of the last people living on the Stig. So another case may hallucination at the workplace today in Dublin. This time, HR employee that submitted legal documents with AI, boo. And once again, that's specifically why we need our guardrails, specifically why we were talking about what actually is the AI outputting. Is it, unbounded? Do you make sure it makes sense at some level, right? Meaning, this is our template. We know this should be in that output for this particular template. And two is shout out to Kiki. That's gonna get you sued, not us, but that's gonna get people sued when you're hallucinating with legal documents. And even the legal industry says you could use AI as a assistant, but you got to go over it before you submit it to a judge, right? So that company or person is probably going to be reprimanded by the legal counsel. I don't know what it is over there though, Kiki, in Europe, but I know here. Shout out. Let's see. Steph said, "Have you looked at the NIST profile?" I have. I think I'm gonna do a video on that. I was surprised how big it was. I think I got it on my hard drive. It was a pretty big document, but yeah, that's definitely in there, Steph. I definitely appreciate that. And I know you shared that one document with Discord, so I definitely have those. I'm definitely going to be doing some streams on those. Shout out to Steph for helping the old guy out. There's so much out there with AI, but she's correct. Side by side complementary roles. Once again, that's with the OWASP and the NIST. Purpose: enumerate the specific risks, provide risk governance lifecycle level. Once again, tactical engineering. NIST RMF is strategic enterprise. PBO cannot enunciate today. Output, and just Kiki was just talking about that. The risk list, prompt injection, data leakage. The NIST RMF, policy roles and process. The audience, dev, AppSec, and red team. The RMF is executive, GRC, and architects. Update cadence, fast and threat driven, stable and governance driven. So yeah, OWASP change. And two is the things we don't have in place, that we don't have guardrails or we don't have fixes of finding. So we should be reviewing our findings every month and kind of figure out how we need to fix it or what we need to put around it, or do we need to hire some consultants to come in and help us? Once again, from your poem, which basically is just a PM schedule, probably have that in Planner. And we're going to start showing us some of this stuff. I like to use Teams and Microsoft because most people use that at work. See what Steph's talking about. It's still in process. Okay. Let me see what I'm looking at then. I'll bring it up at the end, Steph. I know you probably got to go to work. I'll double check on that then, Steph. I got to see what I was looking at then. PBO got a lot of stuff going on, but it's, concrete mapping for the OWASP to the AI RMF govern who decides who owns. Use the OWASP to define the AI risk taxonomy, assigns risk owners and each risk category. Once again, prompt injection is an AppSec check. Set the risk appetite. What level LM risk are you trying to be acceptable? Once again, prompt injection. And we're going to talk about what services we're going to use for that, which is LLM01, is a high risk class. All Gen A apps must implement guardrails and testing. And that's what we're going to talk about, how we're going to do those guardrails. Two, map where risk exists. Map OWASP risk to use cases. Once again, chatbot, RAG, your agents, your data type. Are you using PII, CUI, HIPAA, high trust, FTI, federal tax information? So, what data types and what security levels of your data types are you looking for? Example, your RAG system includes LM02 sensitive information disclosure and vector weakness. Give me one quick second. I gotta cut my little heater off. I'm in here baking. Give me 1 second. Let's roll. So once again, we got to figure out from sensitive info, what are we putting into our our AI and our LLM or our LMR, which is research large language model for research. What are we putting in there, right? Because I think a lot of time we're getting we call it spillage in the federal space. You have PII or sensitive data. It's in your organization, but you have it in a system that's not been approved for that level of data. So we want to make sure when we putting stuff in systems, especially LLM, we know what type of data should go in there. And two, in the front end with our guardrails, if we put some in a prompt that shouldn't be in there, before it goes through our workflow, that should be able to get redacted or at least identified so we can do something with it. The measure, how bad is the risk? Use OWASP scenarios to test the likelihood and impact. Measure prompt injection success rate, data leakage attempt, hallucination frequency, cause spikes for unbounded consumption. Once again, shout out to my man Wire Dog. We don't want to have the 55,000 bill that comes up, right? So we want to make sure we're not unbounded out here. I like that word for some reason, unbounded. So, but once again, red team test shows 3 to 10 successful prompt injection, and so the risk score is increased. So we talked about um, how do you test these particular top 10 inside your organization so you could risk your organization. A lot of times when I'm first going through, I would just do just kind of like a verbal risk. If we put SSNs out there and it got leaked out to somebody else, all right, we would have to notify the IRS. So that would be an 8 out of 10, right? Or if we're a hospital and we leak hospital data, all right, that would be an 8 out of 10 if that happened. Now we can test our system to see what's the vulnerability of that happening, but out of the box, we said 8 out of 10. But we have guardrails, we have redaction, we have policies and procedures. So even though it's 8 out of 10 is happening, we believe we're 4 out of 10 because these are the controls we have around it, and we have these controls documented. Shout out to Space Taco. She's not out here, but when our third party assessor comes in the house, they would want to see that data. That's how we kind of review risk, and we're not negligent. Once again, we talked about risk at a high level. Manage what controls will apply. We just got through talking about that. Prompt validation, output filtering, tools you use, rate limits and budgets, human in the loop. Once again, excessive agency. I put that out with Unbound too, but they actually drilled it down more specifically with excessive agency. Once again, these are the things we need to be putting in effect from a GRC perspective. Once again, we don't put them in effect. We make sure these are in effect and that we can test them. Then when we talk about risk, we can lower our risk because once again, we have prompt validation, output filtering, tool use constraint, rate limit, and human in the loop. If I'm just starting, I got a lot of human in the loop. I'm human in the loop. All right. So once again, that brings your risk down. You put it on a human. A lot of people have sloppy humans, but once again, that's not on the AI, right? That's on the human. Practical workflow, how teams actually use both. Start with the NIST AI, set governance and accountability. That's what we were talking about before. Uh, Facts at a high level. Used once again OWASP top 10 as a threat model for Gen AI. Shout out to Chris. We're always talking about risk registers and threat models. OWASP risk into the RMF and the measured activities. Implement controls and document the risk treatment and manage. Continuously monitor OWASP risk as models and use cases evolve. This is exactly what regulators and auditors expect. And that's kind of what we were just talking about. And since we're in GRC, we know we're going to get audited. If something happens bad, we're going to get audited. If it's not ongoing, so you want to make sure you have documentation, so because you don't want to be viewed as negligent, right? That's when you get the big fine. Even if you get hacked, if you say this is what we had, this is how we were reviewing risk, this is how we test what we had risk, these are the numbers, this is our write-ups, right? They wouldn't consider you negligent. And shout out to Wire Dog, and that's kind of what's coming up a little more. AIs to monitor AI, and we definitely do a little bit of that because when the output comes out, we want AI to talk about what's the guardrails, what's the drift percentages, and how much we're going to let it drift. So you could have, but hopefully you have different AI looking at that AI, right? So, but that's actually a good comment. AWS generative AI security scope. We just looked at the OWASP top 10. We're going to talk about some of the AWS services that we're going to put in place. And they have different scopes for different AI machine learning. So scope 1 is just consumer apps. You're talking about ChatGPT, Midjourney. Scope 2 is using an app or a SaaS with generative AI features. Salesforce Einstein GPT, Amazon Q, developer. So you're calling an AI using their API. Pre-trained models, building your app on a version model. Amazon Bedrock based model. I think ChatGPT, when you use their APIs to call, you're talking about clouds in there too. Scope 4, a fine-tuned model, a model on your data. Now we're putting our company data in and we're adding to it and making it a more specific domain for our particular company. Amazon Bedrock with customized model. They're actually Amazon SageMaker's Jumpstart. And a self-trained model, training a model from scratch on your data. You can use that with Amazon SageMaker. So shout out to Wired. He was talking to me. I'm just at 1.5. So on this particular journey, I'm hoping to do on 2026 is I've been doing a lot of ChatGPT, doing a little cloud, but I'm just doing a consumer app, using it to help me help me build infrastructure, help me check structure. Now I'm actually going to start calling their size to get the information, which will bring me up to scope 2. But PBO is really at 1.5 and kind of moving his way up. Once again, this is what we're looking at earlier. This is from a chat bot. A chat bot usually has a lot of the same things you will be using in any of your models. Because you're going to have clients, it's going to be chat bot or putting a prompt in SaaS or a chat bot and sending it to the SaaS backend for me is pretty much the same. But once again, those are the top 10 right there. We're going to kind of drill down and more and look at those particular individuals. Once again, if anybody get any more questions, drop them in the chat. Drop the link if anybody wants to come up. No pressure on this Friday. TGIF getting 2026 started off strong. Let's go. So this is one of the standard. Let me get my fake AWS architecture. We're just gonna run it through real quick. Once again, this is the technology. We're gonna roll our sleeves up and get a little dirty today. You see at the customers that count at the top. You see in the pink WAF web application firewall. There's Shield for DDoS protection. And AWS Cognito. We're going to talk about a little of these features. That's where you save your username and password for your website. You don't want to co-mingling it with your infrastructure because you have internal users and external users. Inside your Cognito, you put your web users in there. So you can check their IPs. You can let them use their Facebook, but they really have a different authentication and authorization mechanism than your internal user. And there you see your AWS Amplify hosting application. That's really your Java app, React. That's actually AWS version for it. They kind of got a no-code version of that. Your Amazon API gateway, that's what you use when you're doing web apps. You see it right there. Request forward to your API gateway for your backend process. There's your Lambda, which basically is your Java, C#, whatever coding you want to do. Your user ID is who you are before you send to the back. Private link is a long story short is you're using AWS network and you're not going on a regular internet. Your initial prompt and your final response. So we were talking about LM001 will be your prompt. Validating your inputs from guardrails are sent to your agents using your user ID. That's what we were talking about. What guardrails we have. We got different guardrails for your input and your output. Right. So we won't be saying anything crazy like Kiki. We don't want to be getting sued. Final response from your agent is sent to your guardrails for validation. Your agents for Amazon Bedrock. We just talked about this kind of their version, and you can kind of pick your LLM. Output is passed to the agent. Custom authorization for logic implemented in your Lambda function for your third-party API calls. We talked about calling third party. So once again, is your user ID authorized to call that? Are you authenticated enough to make those particular calls? Because we're going to have multiple API calls, and depending on your level of authorization, you might be able to, look up some information, but you might not be able to send some money to the bank, right? So this custom authorization is going to let us know what your user ID can and cannot do. Contextual information fetched from your RAG with your user ID parameters. Once again, we're going to kind of touch on this. We kind of getting a little more technical than we normally do. And shout out to Chris. He wants me to lab where we actually set something like this up. I haven't signed up for that yet, but we definitely going to talk about it. Once again, put any questions, cybersecurity in the chat. And I'm going to kind of flow through these. I kind of highlighted the big parts of it. And we went through the architectural diagram. Now talk about the services that are in the architectural diagram that's going to help us with our OWASP top 10. The first one is prompt injection. We saw the Lambda function in there. That's our LLM orchestrate. It performs strict input validations by extracting the event payload from the gateway, conducting both syntactic and semantic validation by sanitizing inputs, applying allow list, deny list of keywords, validating inputs against a predefined format pattern. The Lambda function helps prevent prompt injections with its LLM001 from 2025. We looked at the guardrail, provides additional layer by filtering and blocking sensitive content. You can also use guardrail to prevent, once again, prompt injection by detecting and filtering out harmful manipulative prompts before you reach the LLM. We talked about the data you put in. These are the services to make sure you don't put anything crazy in there. You don't put anything that's going to break the company. And once again, validate. And like we talked about, we need to be giving the prompt a template. So it says this is the contract between us as a company and the LLM and what we should be putting in this template. We should not be letting employees put wild stuff in this template, specifically when it's in a certain workflow, right? Because the workflow is looking for certain things, which is a contract. Implementing Amazon Bedrock prompt management and versioning allows for continuous improvement of the user's experience while maintaining overall security of the application. By carefully managing changes to the prompts and their handling, you can enhance functionality without introducing new vulnerabilities and mitigating, once again, prompt injection. So if it's a prompt and this is the format we want employees to use, we're gonna have a version of that. They should be checking it out, changing a couple of things in the prompt and sliding that prompt in because it's something about the workflow they're doing, right? So I want to do a prompt injection for a risk assessment for infrastructure inside AWS. So inside that prompt, this is the things I wanted to look at, right? I want you to check a S3 bucket. I want you to check what Lambda function you get, what programming, what versions. Make sure all your core things are in scope and has no vulnerabilities in it. Once again, we should have a standard format to do that in. PBO is working on that too. So don't let me think I'm way ahead of you. Don't be fooled, wire dog. Number 2 is sensitive information disclosure. Once again, from our architecture, we just look like the LLM, which is the Lambda function, which basically is just code. You could put Java in there, JavaScript, Python. So don't let the Lambda function, that's the code we're using to actually validate. If it's our input or for this, validate it's not sensitive information. It performs strict input validation by extracting the event payload from the API gateway, conducting both syntactic and semantic validation, enables downstream application components to mitigate the risk of sensitive information disclosure, addressing concerns related into the 002, which is sensitive information disclosure. Okay, so we're going to get to that. That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. How do we prevent social engineering? That's a good point. That's a good point. That's coming up too. But like too, I think validating your input will help you with social engineering. Supply chain vulnerabilities. How to respond to certain types of event. What are your outer dependencies? Remove or upgrade clean versions. These are two supply chain vulnerabilities called chalk and debug packages. Check for that SHA infected packages. Rotate secret keys. We were talking about my man WireDog, who that 55,000 their keys got on the out there in the web, and somebody charged them 55,000 keys or tokens. So here we want to make sure we rotate our tokens. Get Pi hubs. We want to do that probably every 6 months, because sometimes you do got to make some light programming changes, especially if you're mature. You want to make it where you change your tokens and it automatically flows through all your programming, your infrastructure. When you build code, it automatically pulls those new tokens out when you put them in production. When you build production, it already knows that you invalidated those tokens, so it knows to get one. But once again, you need to be mature to be able to do that. How to build your pipeline. Check for unauthorized GitHub action workflows or unexpected script interactions. Use Amazon Inspector. One of the service finding for exposures to Chalk Debug or Shailu, or follow recommended recommendations. And also SBA. What are your build of materials of your particular third-party SaaS application? Because we had a third party, a Log4j came out. We didn't realize all our third parties were toast, right? So we had to stop using them until they got those fixed. But it took us a while to figure out who was using what. So these bill of materials let you know what your third parties are using. So if something comes about, you as a GRC person needs to have an inventory list. And that can be hard because sometimes your third party really don't want you to know how they build it. It's part of their secret sauce. So that's fine, but you got to have this build list. So you need to be able to let me know if you got a Log4j or some other thing you need to be working on it because of vulnerability. I might need to let the IRS or HIPAA and HITRUST know that we're actually validating our stuff to see if we've been hacked. But if I don't know you're using that, I don't know, let my regulatory divisions know that we need to review it. So once again, from your third party supply chain, what do you have in place to make sure they're doing what they should be doing? Data and model poisoning. Data poisoning happening due to pre-training, domain adaptation, fine-tuning, where poisons and data is introduced. Just jump down. For example, you can use Amazon Transcribe toxicity detection, a capability for they talk about doing it on voice data. For text data, you can consider using Amazon Bedrock guardrails for that. So once again, these are the services AWS has um, that you can use. And part of GRC is understanding what's available so you can tell your development team and your organization or even your third parties, we need to be using this, or why are you not using this? Or we want you to use this before you get our business. Right. So that's kind of where going over the OWASP top 10 LLM from a GRC perspective weighs in. Trained models can be tested using a toxicity evaluation technique from FemVal or Amazon SageMaker Studio model evaluation capabilities. Careful, consider what you use case defined as poisonous and develop mechanisms for surfacing this kind of data before it's introduced to a model through a pre-approach training. Once again, you got to work with your development team. Shout out to Engineering Cannabis. He's not here, but he builds these models. So working with him, we're like, well, how do you figure out if it's poison? How do we lock down our internal data lake? Right? Because a lot of times we build a data lake to train these models with, or at least they have some data and we use our company's data, right, to add to the training and make it more company specific. How do we make sure that's not being poisoning or somebody tampering with it? Input or output handling. Another critical aspect to security managing LLM outputs, because the LLM might generate content that includes executable code, JavaScript, or Markdown. There's a risk of a CSS attack if the contents is not properly handled. To mitigate this risk, apply output encoding such as HTML encoding, JavaScript escaping, neutralization of harmful content. So once again, part of that and your guardrail needs to be, once again, I'm gonna call it enhancing your output, once again, to make sure you're not vulnerable to certain attacks. Excessive agency, once again, apply least privileges. Use the AWS identity management roles for action groups for your Lambda function, which interacts with plugins, external mitigation. For once again, for your six, this is demonstrated in a physical architecture diagram. The agent plugin layer Lambda function is associated with least privilege role for secure access interface with other AWS services. Once again, we're going to look at the architecture right again, but once again, where they say we're vulnerable at in the architecture, these are the things we have in place, once again, as a mitigation for those type of controls. Embedding vector, once again, it's least privileges, identity and access management. Once again, you want to have your least privilege IAM role for secure access to interface with your internal AWS. Remember, we passing that user ID for the particular person putting in the prompt. So we know, once again, the authorization of the data, the IAM roles with least privileges on that action for your Lambda function. Remember, Lambda function is just what codes you're using to make those calls. Generally minimizing the risk of embedded weakness. Once again, if a person's low level, he shouldn't be having access to high level resources behind your LLM or getting high level answers from your LLM, right? So once again, we're putting guardrails around what answer an LLM could answer for a particular person's job role. That role right there, AIM roles. A lot of times we do AIM roles with job roles. Misinformation. I think shout out to my wire dog was talking about social engineering. I'm just gonna hit the red part. Misinformation. These are key features for reasoning. You can do mathematical validation framework inside your LLM. We have a policy-based knowledge representation. As part of that, you got rules, procedures, and guidelines into structure with the mathematical format. Natural language to logic translation. LLMs handle natural language understanding and a symbolic reasoning engine performs that mathematical validation. Explaining the explainable validation results. Validation checks produce detailed findings that introduce whether the content is valid, invalid, or no data. The feature provides clear explanation for its decision. A lot of times, too, is once again, how is these LLMs and AIs making decisions? A lot of times, it's kind of hard to figure that out. Interacting with your testing environment. You can use access to a chat playground and a Bedrock console to test and redefine policies in real time. The feature supports interactive tests through Amazon Bedrock console and automatically test into API integration. Once again, we want to have our test cases. Also, you can do JSON format. I'm a big JSON guy. So once again, how do you put guardrails around your AI so it won't give you misinformation? And seamless AWS integration. Once again, it integrates directly with Amazon Bedrock guardrails. You can use alongside other configurable guardrails like contextual grounding checks. So there's a lot of things inside Bedrock guardrails, and the future videos we'll talk about those different level of guardrails. Shout out to Larry, my favorite PM in the house. Flip out is best in the mind, so I turn to lead the way without learning. So I appreciate you. I appreciate it. We all learning on this one, man. Trying to get up to speed. It's gonna be the last one for Unbounded. Common security threats for brute force attacks, session hijacking, denial of service. To mitigate these risks, implementing best practices like my favorite MFA, rate limiting, secure session management, automatic session timeouts, regular token rotation. Shout out to WireDog. We want to get that big bill, so we don't regularly rotate our tokens. Additionally, deploying edge securities like WAF, distributed denial of service mitigation. In preceding architecture, WAF is integrated with the Amazon API to filter incoming traffic, block unintended requests, protect application with threats like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, or DDoS attack. Also, WAF bot control further enhance security by providing visibility and control over bot traffic, allowing administrative to block or rate limit unwanted bots. The feature essentially can be managed with AWS Firewall, providing consistent and robust approach to application protection. That's the last one. The only WAF is just expensive. Last time I looked out of the box, it was like $4,000 a month. So I need to check on WAF. So I do some poor man WAF. There's a network. There's a network subnet you can put in, so you can actually say these are the ports I have open. These are controls. You can actually, as it actually writes to your AWS cloud, which is basically their SIM, you can figure out how quick it's writing. So if you're getting like 100 requests inside of a minute, inside of a minute, that's a bot or a brute force attack. We know that IP address, we could physically block it inside. WAF does all that for you automatically, but at $4,000, I ain't trying to spend it. So we can actually build our poor man WAF. But once again, if we're doing a certain level, once again at the Fortune 500 company, that's no money, right? They spend WAF in a heartbeat. So once again, just talking about the OWASP top 10 at a high level, just kind of getting our toe wet on that, just really just trying to grow with AI in the future, right? And that's some of the things we were kind of walking through, some of the AWS services we would use in life and how we can configure it. And once again, what services would we use on, once again, what controls? You see there, prompt injection, improper output handling, sensitive information disclosure, misinformation, unbound consumption, system prompt leakage, vector and embedding weakness, and excessive agency. From your user ID, what should you be able to call on the back end and what are you responsible for? A lot of times, if you can call it from that agent plugin, you can just do what you want. All right. We trust it. If you got that far, you're good. Right. But the extra level of security, and where I'm talking about least privileges, is take your user ID, go to the authentication layer, figure out what's your job responsibility, and then let you know what things in the back end can you reference. Or it could be you in this RAG database, but in there we have a tag for low, medium, high. You're a low user, so these are the things you can look inside that database, right? So that's where we start adding attributes to your authentication to help you once again with AI. Here, let me look at something real quick. I don't know if Steph's still in the chat. This is what I was looking at, Steph. Did she say playbook? Once again, put any chats. I was looking at this, Steph. I don't know if this is correct. Steph asked me, was I familiar with the NIST AI profiles? And let's see. I was looking at the AI playbook and I thought the profiles were in the playbook. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I'm looking at. This is 147 pages. So I have to get with Steph, make sure PBL is looking at it. And we were looking at the govern and the map for AI. And this is it and how you measure it. And once again, this is really drilling down into it, really getting into those particular things, accountability for framework specific for federal agency. So that's what I was talking about, Steph. I don't know if you're still in the mic. Yeah, I was looking at this, Steph, and I thought this had the profiles in there, but I think I'm wrong. I was looking at the AI reference playbook from NIST. When did this come out? 740 pages. It had the govern managed map, and I thought the profiles were in here. Let's see if you look. I might be wrong. So I might need to dig that up. So yeah, that's what I was looking at. The AI playbook. And once again, this is kind of stuff I use when I'm doing AI governance. Once again, a lot of federal clients are starting to ask it more. So once again, I'm just trying to get comfortable from a federal perspective, what do I need to look at and what do I need to validate from that particular thing. Okay, yeah, I think I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'll definitely go check that out, Steph. I appreciate that. Throw that in the chat if you got a link for that particular. You did you drop the link earlier? I will go find it, Steph. I believe you. Did you drop it in here or did you drop it in Study GRC? Oh. Once again, I'm gonna hang out any longer. Just wanted to go through a quick lunch and learn. Once again, check out the OWASP top 10 for AI. Once again, definitely, I think the place to start. If you get into it or you're not as mature as you need to be, I think it's definitely a risk register. I would start off those 10 in the risk registers. What we just walked through would be how you would walk through and testing your threat model. I I might be blocking your links. I think I'm blocking your links. I don't see any of your links, Steph. I might be blocking them. Can anybody see Steph links? I think YouTube might be blocking those, Steph, which is weird. I thought you did it on my other stream. That's interesting. I think I'm blocking you, Steph. I think I'm blocking your links. Shout out to YouTube. They want to make sure we don't have any prompt injection going on. Once again, put anything you want in the chat. Drop that in Discord for me, Steph. My bad. I think YouTube is blocking me. I gotta upgrade you on my back end, which you can actually, I guess, upload in there. I think there's a couple different moderators on there. I don't know if I got you as a moderator. I gotta make you one. Let's see. How would I do that? Could be a struggle streaming as always. Once again, put any questions. Chat of cybersecurity in the chat. So if we can make Steph a moderator real quick while we at it, struggle streaming. Can I make it? I might need to think about that. I think I did that before. Once again, I hope everybody's having a great day. Let's see. That's not what I want to do. Once again, I hope everybody's having a great Yeah, I need to figure out how to do that. Let's see. I'll figure out how to do that. People are always struggling. Let's see. Let's see. What's gonna help everybody? Put that as a moderator. Energy moderator. I appreciate. I think I upgrade you on Discord. We'll check it out next one. Stuff. I'm going to class and doing. Can learn how to build Python. That's cool. I'm right there with you. I probably start doing some labbing in AWS. My programming language of choice now is Python, so I actually been doing it more of a Discord. I mean, not Discord as data engineering. But now I love shout out to Python. So yeah, I've been getting my Python up a little bit. No, shout out to that, man. Take those AI classes and get better. Once again, drop a few more questions. PBO's about out. He gonna go lay down for a minute. He's not feeling the best. Talking in the third person. But once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me. Trying to go live a little more. Once again, trying to get my hours up there. Catch up there with Mr. Whitlock and Study GRC. Shout out to B Dubs. I know she's doing her thing out there, so I'm usually bothering those guys. Once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. Once again, trying to get my little hours up. Ping me in these cybersecurity streets out there. Touching a little bit more on AI. Once again, I think AI is not the future. AI is right now. Once again, I'm out. Everybody have a good week. And once again, happy Friday. I think I'm going to go get a little lunch and call it a day. Once again, I'm out. Everybody have a